Well, hello, friends. Greg Koukl here for Stand to Reason, and I'm glad you're with us today. Just want to say thank you so much for those new strategic partners we have on board. This is August, and that's the month where we emphasize how much we value our strategic partners and encourage others to sign up. We have a program here where we want to see 100 sign up this month as strategic partners. We call it B, one of the 100. You can be part of that group, and we're off to a good start. I think we have 30-something that have already signed up. The first, is that right? No, maybe that's not right. It's not quite that many, but actually we've got a good start. I think that's right. I lose my numbers here somewhere in my notes, but we're thrilled for you. 31. Great, yeah. Thank you, Amy. And welcome on board. Strategic partners are, of course, those folk that have committed to Stand to Reason to be financial partners for a certain amount of money each month, sometimes $25, sometimes $50, sometimes more than that, but it's an automatic kind of deal. And you are the bread and butter, the meat and potatoes of our financial partnership at Stand to Reason. We depend on you. And, of course, when I take phone calls, there's lots of times where people say, yep, I'm a strategic partner, glad to be that, glad to participate, be part of what you guys are doing. And, of course, we're really thankful for that. If you would like to become a strategic partner for Stand to Reason, if you've been thinking about it for a while, this is the time to do it. You can go to str.org/partner and sign up there. And we're going to actually give you something as kind of a little thank you gift. Not so little, actually. It is the entire 22-23 reality conference, Seek and You Will Find, okay? Seek and You Will Find. Incidentally, that was the conference where we focused in on the issue of deconstruction and deconversion. Boy, that is a fantastic conference. Okay, we're going to send it to you via video on demand. We're also going to give you a reality conference T-shirt. Both are yours with our warm thanks when you become a strategic partner here in August, giving $25 or more each month. So once again, just go to our website, str.org, and //partner, and follow the prompts, okay? Love to have you on board. Love to hear from you sometime. Yep, I'm a new strategic partner. Now, I had an experience yesterday at a doctor's office, and it seems like I've been going to a lot of those lately. Nothing pathological, just so you know. But, man, I got mechanical stuff like crazy. My back, my legs, my hip, my feet, blah, blah, blah. And so it seems like every time I turn around, I'm getting something. My shoulder now, too. I'm getting something fixed, but working on that. Wanting to stay in the saddle for quite a long time, doing meaningful work and enjoying my family and my home and etc. But so yesterday I was at the doctor's office getting a test. This is where they poke a bunch of needles in your legs, and also, that's one aspect of it, and then they're trying to look for continuity. Then they have another one. They do electrical shocks all up and down your leg, so neither is fun. But I had a sweet gal that was doing the first electric shock thing, and I kind of got through that whole thing. But we started talking, and I'm not always sure how this takes place. I think I was talking about traveling quite a bit, and finally she asked me, why do I travel? And I said, because I do a lot of public speaking. And then she asked me, what do I speak on? So I have kind of a natural entree into discussions about spiritual things if someone picks up the hint, so to speak, if they pick up the hint or if they show an interest. Now, by the way, if I tell them that I talk about Christianity, we train Christians to think more carefully about their convictions and also to make the case that Christianity's true. And when I say true, this is my way of opening this part of the conversation, just so you know. So if you were a fly on the wall in this conversation, this is what you would have heard. And when I say true, I mean true like the way gravity is true. Now, the reason I say that is because it is so common now for people to relativize religious beliefs, religious faith. And these are the words that I've been encouraging people not to use because those are compromise, but rather use synonyms for the same thing that sound fresher, your convictions, your spiritual convictions, rather than religious faith or beliefs, for example. But anyway, I explained to the gal, the technician, that we are training Christians to help make the case that Christianity is actually true, like gravity is true. And I just took it a step further. In other words, what I mean is, and I feel compelled to take the extra steps to make this point clear, because for most people it's not clear. It's just not. So I said, for example, if somebody were standing near a garden tomb outside of Jerusalem 2,000 years ago on the right day, they would have seen a formerly dead man walk out of that tomb whose name is Jesus of Nazareth. Sometimes I say, look at it, it was so real that if you were standing next to that cross and you put your hand on it, you would have gotten a splinter. That the blood flowing down from that cross would have had a blood type. All I'm doing is trying to find a way to let people know I'm talking about the nature of reality here. Now, of course, we have to defend that, but I'm just saying this is what what I'm talking about when I say it's true. And of course, this is what we train other Christians to do, to defend that claim. All right. And as I'm talking about this, she said, well, that makes sense. Yeah, I get it. She said, actually, my father, who's no longer alive, but my father was a preacher. He was a pastor. So I understand all of that. Oh, okay, great. Okay, so things are moving along smoothly. Picture a totally relaxed environment. I'm laying down on the thing, and she's shooting these voltage into my legs, and they're sometimes hopping up and down, but then we have pauses, and we're able to discuss a little bit. But I ask her, and this is another bridge question for me. I said, well, what are your own convictions on this issue? Do you share the same views as your father? And she said, well, yeah, kind of. She said, my father was really open on religious issues. Now, I'm not sure what that means. Now, when you're not sure what someone means when they use a certain phrase or sentence to talk about their own view, you always ask a question. No, duh. What do you mean by that? Of course. And I said, I'm not sure what you mean by open. She said, well, my dad didn't actually believe that everyone was going to hell, but rather most people would go to heaven. Okay. Now, I'm not sure if she was thinking that I would think that way too, that I'm talking about a Christianity that's kinder and gentler, like her dad believed in, the open kind of thing. And that's virtuous. That's a good thing. And I suspect she was somewhere in that camp. And so, but that's not my view, right? Now, I could have just spoken right out and say, well, that's not my view. Now we're in a contrary position. Instead, I said something else. I said, do you think that Jesus was open like that? And she said, yes, I do. Now, I got that line because I made a big mistake at a church a couple of years before when I made a mess of things right after I'd been teaching on the tactics, and there I am as people are coming out of the church. I'm shaking hands, and I have a gal who says to me, I'm a witch. No, what'd she say? I'm a pagan, I'm a Christian, and I'm a Buddhist. And I didn't ask a question, which I should have. I went down another line, but then quickly caught my balance again, and I asked this question, which I should have led with, what do you think Jesus would have said about that? Okay, and so that's essentially what I'm saying here. See, I'm learning from my past mistakes. I said, do you think Jesus was open to that? Now, notice, I am not engaging her. I'm not correcting her. I'm not arguing with her. I'm just asking her questions about her view. And because of that, I was very relaxed. She was very relaxed. Of course, she's holding the stun gun, right? So I want to keep her relaxed. And she responded. Yes, I think Jesus was very loving and easygoing. And now I know, as a student of the New Testament and the Gospels for half a century, that what she was characterizing Jesus to be like was not the way Jesus was like. Oh, yeah, he was loving. And of course, I don't think he was easygoing, but I knew where she was going with this. Okay, it's a standard cultural view of the loving kind accepting Jesus. Now, this is a place where I usually ask the question that I asked her, and I asked, have you actually ever read Jesus much? Have you read him closely, or something to that effect? How much have you read Jesus? And she said, oh, quite a bit. I've read it. So I don't know what that amounts to, but I'm convinced in my own mind it can't have been much if that's her assessment of Jesus' view. And so then she asked me, well, what, don't you think he was like that? And I said, well, he was very loving and kind, but by today's standards, I think he would have been considered very judgmental. Because remember, he was the one who called people whitewashed tombs with dead men's bones inside. He was the guy who said, depart from me, I never knew you, you who work iniquity. And he was also the guy who said, the way is broad that leads to destruction, and many are those who find it. And the way is narrow that leads to life, and few are those who find it. So I just wanted to give some counterexamples just for her consideration, which is what I did. Now, at this point, she pushes back again, still completely relaxed. Everything's easygoing. And she said, well, there are lots of interpretations about that. Now, this is another kind of standard pushback, isn't it, that many of you have gotten. You're giving a view from the text, and somebody says, well, essentially, that's your interpretation. Now, I have a way of dealing with this, and I think I talk about it in Tactics. And the idea behind it is that, yes, it is an interpretation. We always have to interpret anything we hear someone say or we read. We have to interpret what that is as a mode of communication. But that doesn't mean everything's up for grabs. And sometimes people leave it that way. Well, that's just your interpretation. And but she put it a little differently. It wasn't so dismissive. She said, well, different people have different interpretations on what some of the things Jesus said. Okay, which is true. And I acknowledge that. And somehow in here, the issue of hell came up. And I said, well, Jesus believed in hell. So I have a choice. I could, her dad didn't. Turns out that her dad was a Seventh-day Adventist, and I think they are annihilationists, that God's not going to punish anybody in hell. He's just going to annihilate them. Which, by the way, just as an observation here, a point of information, that's the view of atheists. That is, when they die, they're annihilated. They just disappear. They no longer exist. It's curious that some people would think that this is the view, this is God's way of executing justice, when in fact it's the very view that atheists hold about the end of life. Yes, they just are annihilated, not by God, but annihilated by natural causes because there is no life after death. Anyway, just as an aside there. So in my view here, and this is another thing I mentioned in Tactics, and I did this when I had the TV debate with Deepak Chopra, the New Age guru. And my strategy there was, okay, Dr. Chopra says this, and Jesus says this. So who are you going to believe? All right, and that's the same way that I position this issue. Well, there's a lot of people who don't believe in hell, even people who are pastors. I get that. But Jesus did. And I'm going to stick with Jesus. Even I don't like the idea of eternal torment. She had raised that particular point, eternal torment. I said, I don't like that either. But that's what Jesus believed. And then I gave some examples from Scripture where he talked about this. Pardon me. And, of course, the pushback at this point was there are lots of different interpretations about that Greek word, Gehenna. And I said, yeah, you're right about that. Gehenna was the dump. It was the place where they dumped all kinds of refuse. And this is the place that Jesus referred to, I mentioned to her, as the place where the worm does not die and the fire does not go out. Now I said, I don't think there are any worms in hell. Kind of chuckled there, still friendly. And I'm not convinced there's any fire in hell. These are figures of speech, okay? But it's something important to keep in mind about these figures of speech. And then I said, if I told you that my wife was a ray of sunshine, you would understand what I was getting at, wouldn't you? You wouldn't think that she had anything to do with the sun. Nothing about her was sun-ish. But I'm using this figure of speech to tell you something I believe to be actually true about my wife. And she's nodding, yes, that's right. Okay, therefore, every figure of speech in anybody's conversation, it always meant to communicate a literal truth. So what was the literal truth, do you think, that Jesus was trying to communicate when he described hell as like Gehenna, the fiery dump outside of the city where where the worm doesn't die and the flame doesn't go out? Well, he was trying to communicate, and this is true whether it's wailing and gnashing of teeth or outer darkness or all these other characterizations. He was trying to communicate, this is not a place you want to be. Okay, at bare minimum, this is not a good place, but he believed people were going to go there. And so what am I trying to do? I'm trying to take away the refuge of saying that's an interpretation of a figure of speech. Well, you're right, it is. But what is it? What do you think? And that's when I asked her, do you think that any interpretation is okay? She said, no, I don't. Right. So you have to have an interpretation that comports with the integrity of the text or something like that. So we're moving along, dealing with these kind of parries, these gentle parries, because we're not fighting, we're not arguing. I'm using a lot of questions, and she's moving right along, and she's getting the point of what I'm saying. So those are stones that are going in her shoe, but we're moving forward, so there's no reason to stop. And so after I made the point about the context and what do we draw from these figures of speech, what is the literal truth, now it's the change is falling into the meter. But now she says, well, I can't believe that a loving God would send people into torment forever. How could that be? How could a loving God do that? Now, again, it's another standard objection. And, sometimes it's just a good idea to agree with someone as to the emotional concern about a certain truth of Christianity. And I know the answer to this. I mean, I know an answer that's a good answer, but I'm sure that it's not going to be compelling. It's not like I'm going to give this and she goes, oh, that makes all kinds of sense. That's a good answer. Sometimes you give a good answer and people don't respond that way because it still doesn't feel like a good answer. And I just simply said, when she asks, how could a loving God consign somebody to hell forever to torment? I said, well, I have an answer for that, but I know right now it's not going to be satisfying because it's not even satisfying to me emotionally. And then I just simply said, the punishment fits the crime. So I said, I could have gone into more detail about what I meant by that, but it was pretty obvious. People are being punished in an appropriate way for the crimes they have committed against a holy God. And when I said the punishment fits the crime, she didn't push back. She just said, okay. The answer made sense. Not that she was persuaded, but the answer made sense. And then I said, actually, one of the most dreadful things about hell is that we were made for God, but people say they don't want God. And so, therefore, God gives them what they want. Now, Lewis makes a point about this. God will, either we say, thy will be done, or God says to us, thy will be done. And so if we say to him, we don't want him, he says, okay, I'll give you what you want. And this is banishment from his presence forever. And I explained this to her. This is in Second Thessalonians chapter 1. And I said, look, if we are made for God, and all happiness dwells with God, and we are banished from his presence forever, there is not going to be any happiness for us, and it's going to be cold, dark aloneness forever. And that's part of the torment. So I didn't have to capitalize on the flames and the fire and brimstone and just say, you're going to be alone forever. You're not going to get any of the good stuff that God has to offer. And she didn't push back on that. It seemed to make sense. Now, I'm not trying to go too far here. I'm just trying to give her some things to think about. And I think these are legitimate things to think about regarding this issue, okay? But, again, I had a sense that there was still a little bit more life in the conversation, okay? And so I offered kind of my basic gospel presentation, and I always start with the bad news. Why is that? I don't start with God's love, because that isn't the way the disciples in the book of Acts started. They didn't talk about God's love. They did talk about the danger of God's judgment. And once somebody is fully aware, under the conviction of the Holy Spirit, of the bad news, that means the dangerous spot that they're in, then the opportunity for a pardon seems a lot more appealing. And again, it's not a fire and brimstone, breathing judgment down on her. I'm just saying, as a matter of fact, one day everybody will stand before God. And the books will be open, and we're going to give an account for every single thing that we ever did. And that's not going to be a pretty picture. And then I have my little line that I've been using because I think it communicates well. You're welcome to it if you like. Either Jesus pays or you pay. Either Jesus pays or you pay. That's the calculus. The irony is, even though eternal hell seems extreme, which I admit, salvation is a gift that's free. The rescue is free, I mentioned to her. And then I left it at that. So now there it is. There's the gospel. She knew enough to be able to put all those pieces together. Even if she didn't know much, I think that would be pretty coherent. I gave her something to think about. I am not expecting anyone to, have what's the right word here? An epiphany as I lay on the table and she's holding the stun gun, right? I'm just trying to put a stone in her shoe. In that case, I hope I put a number of stones because she gave me the opportunity, and the conversation went longer. Again, I wish you could have all been there, not because I was so clever. It was just that I was following the game plan in a very simple fashion, and I ended with a clear statement of the gospel in a language I think that made sense to her, with not a lot of religious noise in it, but the truth nonetheless. And she finished her procedure. We ended up moving on to something else. And then I offered, as I often do, to give her something. I said, I don't know if you're a reader or not, but however you respond to this last point here, it's fine with me. You're not going to hurt my feelings at all. But if I gave you a small book to read, would you be interested in taking a look at it? And she said, yes, I'm open-minded. I said, great. I'm going to go downstairs. Now we were just finishing up the procedure. I'm going to grab the book and I'll bring it up to you in a minute. And so the booklet, really, or the smaller piece I gave her was the story of why God died and came to life again. Now that is an abridgment of the story of reality. It's actually just the last third of the book. The whole section that talks about Jesus and the cross and the resurrection, and then the final reward to the final judgment, or the final consequence of reward or judgment. So perfect mercy or perfect justice. And that, if I have something to give to somebody who's not totally chomping at the bit, I'm going to give them the smaller portion rather than the whole book, because it focuses in on the cross, and that's the critical part that I want her to see. And so I offered it. She was very happy, and I did have to point at the author, and I said, by the way, that's me. Not that it would make any difference to her, but sometimes it does make a difference to people. Not trying to, wave my flag or grandstand or anything, but I'm just trying to encourage them to take a closer look at it. So anyway, that was my conversation. Her name's Amy. If you want to offer a prayer for her, that she would read this, that the Holy Spirit would use that to draw her to the Lord. That was my prayer right afterwards, and I've been thinking about her the last day, since that time, yesterday. And but notice how easy it was just to apply the game plan in conversation the way I did. Now, she wasn't hostile, but she wasn't on my side either. And she raised some standard concerns and objections, and I described to you how I just moved through those to speak in a common sense way about what I think is the best explanation for the way things are. And now she's in God's hands. He knows. It's his job to take her from there. All right, let's take a break and come back with your calls on Stand to Reason. All right, we got a full bank of callers here. That's great. So let's go right now to Seagrove Beach in Florida. And Tom, are you underwater there in Seagrove Beach?
No, very fortunately, we're up in the Panhandle. In fact, I live exactly 3 miles from where the Truman Show was filmed.
Oh, no kidding. Oh,
no.
Wow, I know that you guys got hit by this, and it's still raining there. Apparently, maybe that's the East Coast? But I'm actually flying on Thursday. I'm flying out to Florida. Let's see, where am I flying into? Somewhere up north there, but I'm not sure the name. I have to
We're
look.
in the Panhandle by Panama City Beach and stuff.
Yes, right.
We didn't get anything about it all.
No kidding. Well, good for you guys. Okay, what's on your mind, Tom?
First, I want to say I've been a strategic partner for a long time.
Oh, great.
And I encourage people to, if they're able to and stuff, to take up the challenge, because that whatever they donate and stuff is an investment into something very important, and that's the next generation. And it'll reap dividends more than any stocks or interest or anything can do it, because God's kingdom will be greatly enriched by it.
Oh. You want to go on the road with me, man? That was great. I think of it like, just see, Jesus said, where neither moth nor rust destroy nor thieves can break in and steal. Man, that's good forever. So it's a great point, and thank you for making it.
Yeah, I have one quick, easy question first. How many pencils have you broken so far this year?
How many what have I broken?
Pencils.
Oh, pencils. Actually, only one, and you're referring to my presentation on the problem of evil, right? Yeah, I've only done that once so far this year at Summit. Were you there when I did that?
No. The reason I ask is because you got some pencils in the mail at the beginning of the year. Did you not? Special pencils?
I think I got. Yes. Did you? Was that
was
you?
For me. Yeah.
Oh well, thank you.
I saw them at the store, and I said, I have to get these to you because I know they were your favorite pencils.
Yeah, my Ticonderoga. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for those. Thanks so much. Yeah, I just did it like 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. I broke a pencil, making the point, and the reason I do this is because making the point that I got a good pencil, and then when I break it, it's not good anymore. Okay, but I haven't added anything to it like evil. It's a loss of something, that a privation, and that's the nature of evil, a privation, and the pencil is a good way of illustrating that. So, all right, thank you, Tom, for that.
You're welcome. But now to get to my question stuff, I appreciate you taking my call and stuff.
Sure.
Just to set up a little bit, I've been with this particular church for the last about 4 or 5 years, and since I've joined, we've gone through numerous head pastors and and youth pastors. We've had the same associate pastor for the whole time. He's the only one that's been stable, and we just lost one just a couple weeks ago. And I was thinking, why are we losing so many pastors in such a short time and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
To go through them. So I asked the last business meeting, I said, are we doing anything to keep us from making the same mistake? For whatever reason they're leaving, I don't know. But you know, so we don't keep doing it. I said, because I don't think it's fair to the church members, and I don't think it's fair to the people we hire.
Right.
So, I mean, is there something we can do to help prevent this from happening? I even suggested maybe going to an outside source to do our hiring for us. And they said they were talking about that and stuff, and they had the same thing and stuff. But I was wondering if you had, I mean, just for example, the last time we hired a pastor, we had over 600 applications.
Wow.
So we should have the cream of the crop.
Right.
And
wow.
so, I mean, obviously we're doing something wrong or something. I was wondering if you had any insight or suggestions or things that we should look out for, something,
okay,
you know, so we don't keep making the same mistake.
Yeah, well, let me ask you some questions, since I don't know about the whole dynamic that the people in your church have been facing, and you are limited in that too, apparently, based on what you said. But are they being asked to leave, or are they deciding to leave? They're just not staying around, they're going.
Well, I know a couple of them actually left because, well, one retired, and he was older and stuff anyway. We knew it was going to be short term, so to speak. The lead pastor, we figured about 5 years or so. That's what we asked for, stuff, at least, you know, for some stabilization. But he had some health concerns and stuff, so he retired. So we completely understand. I completely understand that. Things happen. So, I mean, that's, you know, thanks. Another time, one of them left to start teaching at a local school, which I understand too, kind of stuff. The thing is, we live in such a beautiful area. I'm wondering if they're trying to get down here and then using that as a springboard to do other things. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's
kind of reasons.
Yeah.
I don't know. They don't tell us. It's kind of shrouded and stuff. I think we should know, I would think.
Well, when they say they won't tell us, you mean the people who are leaving won't tell the church, or the church leadership that remains won't tell you why the person who left left?
The church leadership won't tell us.
Yeah, well, I don't know that there has to be, like, complete transparency on all of these things, but it is like the church has always got to spill the beans on everything and everybody and all that. But it does seem odd if you have a lot of people moving through kind of the turnstile. You know, nobody's hanging around very long, and I don't know what to say about this. I think the way Amy put your question, what should our church look for when hiring a new pastor? And a pastor is a shepherd, all right? So you have to have a person who shepherds. Now, that requires a couple of different things. A shepherd cares for the sheep. So there's a certain, to mix my metaphors here, a certain bedside manner that's associated with that. And the shepherd also guides and directs the sheep, and then sometimes corrects the sheep. I mean, if you think of the 23rd Psalm, you know, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. So these are all aspects. And so if we're looking for a pastor, we want somebody who can guide and direct truthfully, accurately, soundly from the Scriptures, faithful to the foundational things. We want somebody who can also bring correction when necessary. Is not afraid to correct. And this is necessary more and more now, whether it's doctrinal issues or ethical, moral issues. It's got to be willing to stand up and say what's true. And then I think there's also a certain, again, bedside manner that's involved, a certain kind of gentleness that is characteristic of a good pastor. So I heard one person describe it this way, and that was a velvet-covered brick. So they have the strength of a brick, but it's covered with velvet. So there's a softness there, even though there's a sturdiness there. All right.
I understand.
And then when you, since a pastor is functioning as an elder, then the requirements for elders that we see in 1 Timothy and also Titus would apply to a pastor. So there are character qualifications that need to be fulfilled as well. And they're listed there. So those are the kinds of things that I would look for. Now, now on another level, though, since you're hiring a person for a job, and it's their livelihood, I mean, that's the way things work nowadays, the compensation for that pastor on staff has to be adequate to his need. And if the compensation isn't adequate to his need, then he's going to go somewhere else. If you're not paying him enough, or you're not covering health insurance, or whatever it happens to be, whatever the total compensation package amounts to, if it's not adequate for the pastor, he's going to have to look elsewhere. Now,
I understand that, but I'm pretty sure that's not the case here, because they're very well taken care of. In fact, this last one that left, they agreed to help them financially for the next several months while he finds something else.
So got a golden parachute of sorts on his way out.
Kind of, yeah.
How long had that person been with the church?
About a year and a half.
Well, that's not very long.
No.
So, I mean, there's a severance package usually just to help out to make the transition. I hope it wasn't like 6 months, but maybe, would you say a month or month and a half or something? Okay, that's helpful. But, why are they leaving? I that's the question that needs to be asked and also answered if you want to plug the hole in the dike, as it were.
Right.
So, but the associate pastor's been there for a long time.
Yes.
But nobody else has been there for a long time.
No.
Why don't they
Strange.
make the associate into the? I mean, I'm not in favor of a head pastor design. I think multiplicity of leadership, plurality of leadership is more New Testament. The elders teach and whatever. But in any event, if you're looking for more pastors, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you could talk to the associate pastor personally and just say, "What's going on here? We've got a big back door. People are coming in and going out like fast, and this is confusing. And it's hard to build a stable church like that, a community." And I'm sure he agrees with that. Maybe he'll have some wisdom, maybe not. It all depends on why they are leaving. That's what you need to find out.
Mm-hmm.
But I've offered a couple of thoughts on what I think a church ought to be looking for in a pastor.
Okay, I really appreciate your help, and I will definitely pass it on and stuff, and wherever I can and stuff.
All
but
right.
I plan on talking to the associate pastor, find out more detail, not because I want to gossip or things, but just genuinely interested.
Sure.
Why is it happening? Why? How can we stop it from happening?
Yeah, you're not revealing secrets to other people. That's a gossiper. You're just trying to figure out what is it that's unhealthy about your church. You're not trying to dig up dirt. Just what's going on. So I think your spirit is a good one, and I don't think the question is inappropriate. It's completely appropriate. Okay?
Okay, we appreciate your help.
You're welcome, Tom, and I'm glad you're not underwater, and I'm glad you're a strategic partner. Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
All right, buddy. Bye. So let's go to Wichita, and this is Zach. Zach, welcome to the show.
Hey there, Greg. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, so I had 2 questions if we get to them. The first one is I'm apprenticing as a carpenter, and my boss, we go on lunch all the time, and he goes to Church of Christ. And I've come to realize that he believes through conversations that using musical instruments in worship is essentially something that could be damnable.
Damnable?
And damnable, essentially, yeah. He kind of changed his position. He was saying, it's like he says that just because the Bible doesn't teach it doesn't mean you should do it. Doesn't say anything against it. He treats essentially using musical instruments in worship like chewing tobacco. Hey, just because Jesus doesn't say you can't do it doesn't mean you can, essentially.
Well, that's if you're going to use chewing tobacco as an example, then there's got to be a good additional reason why this isn't appropriate. By the way, I don't think chewing tobacco is a sin anyway. Well, why is chewing tobacco a sin? Anybody who says chewing tobacco is a sin and is overweight is guilty of the same sin if chewing tobacco is a sin. People are very selective about the way they apply these kinds of things, okay? I'm just saying, all right? But I don't want to get into a big deal about chewing tobacco, but to compare chewing tobacco, which I don't get that, to instruments in a church, and to say, well, it wasn't prohibited, so that doesn't mean it's okay. Well, I don't know. Why not? Does he drive a car?
It doesn't say you can't do that.
Virtually nothing that he does in his life nowadays bears any resemblance to the way people lived 2,000 years ago. Okay? And incidentally, the Psalms are filled with reference to musical instruments, and so is the historical record for Israel.
I brought that up, and I guess that doesn't make any difference.
Okay.
It's not a thing for me, but I was wondering if this issue doesn't fall under Romans 14, the weak and the strong.
Right. And ironically, I just did a show where we talked about that passage earlier today. So, leave them alone. If you don't want to use an instrument, don't use it. But as Paul says, don't look down on the weaker brother. The stronger brother should look down on the weaker brother, and the weaker brother should not be judgmental of the stronger brother. Okay? Leave each other alone. Quit condescending. Quit judging. That's the principle there in the first half of Romans 14 on that issue. So, okay, there is no prohibition, and if there's no prohibition, then you can't say that it's a damnable sin. Now, it might be that something that somebody is doing is a violation of another principle of Scripture, and I presume the person who says, well, smoking or chewing tobacco and everything, that's a sin because your body's a temple of the Holy Spirit. But ironically, Paul himself did not make that kind of application to that verse. He's talking about sexual behavior. So your moral behavior can pollute the temple. He doesn't say food can pollute the temple, or alcohol can pollute the temple, or tobacco can pollute the temple, because he's not talking about physical stuff. If he was saying that physical ailments pollute the temple, then there's all kinds of people with physical ailments that are unfit temples. People who are blind, people who go to war and they lose a leg or an arm or something like that, or people who have diabetes, or a whole host of things like, oh, you're not a fit temple. That's not what Paul meant. Okay, so basically, the New Testament teaches liberty, and the only thing we're not at liberty to do is to sin, and sins are clearly described and defined in the text. But folks like in the Church of Christ who are anti-instrumentalists or non-instrumentalists, actually they're anti, based on what your friend said, they are free to worship a cappella, no problem, no complaint. But to claim that those who use instruments in church are going to hell, that's what damnable means. By what justification does anyone make that point?
Well, that's what I asked him. He says they believe, they teach the Bible there. I'm like, well, show me. Well, we just had a conversation. I don't look down on them.
Yeah.
In fact, I just pointed to Romans 8. I was like, hey, if that's what you guys think is great, then hey, that's good. But when he said, hey, if God's going to damn you to hell for worshiping with instruments, that's between you and him. And when he said that, I was just like, wow, all right.
Yeah. Why would God damn you to hell for using an instrument? This is what, and by the way, what is proscribed in Scripture is the kind of judgment he's making on you, and that is in Romans 14. Stop doing that, Paul says. Don't show contempt for your weaker brother, and don't judge the stronger brother. Stop doing that. So the irony is he has set something up as a moral obligation which the Scripture doesn't set up as an immoral obligation, but in so doing and employing it with regards to others who differ, he is violating something the Scripture actually does say is a moral obligation. And, it's just crazy, but that's what legalism does, and that's what you see here in this situation. Yep. This is just rank legalism.
Yep. And do I have time for a quick second question?
Sure, real quick.
Yeah. I just found out last week, I've just been listening to your podcast for the last month, and I listened to the last year's worth of podcast work in the last month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so trying to start up an outpost. But anyway, I found out last week that you didn't get married to your 48, which blew me away when I found that out. And I was just curious because I'm 30. I've never even been in a relationship because I screwed around in my 20s.
Yeah.
But, I thought it was actually quite encouraging to hear that.
Well, good.
And I was just wondering what's the story where did you just commit to doing your thing and just weren't looking, or what's the deal?
No, that wasn't it at all. It was circumstantial. I mean, I always my what's the right word here? My focus or my direction or what my impulse or my nature is to be in a long-term committed relationship, and I was in a few of those. Actually, 3, and I was engaged twice, and those didn't work out. They were really hard, and that eats up a lot of time, Yep. Until finally I did get married in 1948 to Steese, my wife, and that's the way it all worked out. Now we lost a baby in 2002, and we wanted children, so we ended up adopting in 2004 when I was 54, the Annabeth. She's 19 now, and then Eva in 2006. No, 2007. What? I got married when I was 48, not in 1948, because I didn't exist. And thank you, Amy. She's just clarifying for me. Yeah, so, my team has told me don't use numbers because you sound senile. So I just did. I used numbers and I sounded senile. Thank you for your help, Amos. I thought you were going to say, you're not married to Steve, you're married to somebody else. I said, really? Who's that? I'm really confused now. So
hey, perhaps you should run for the presidency.
Yeah. Well,
I'm kidding.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, 2007, Eva came along. She's 16 now, and it's just what God gave me. It's the way it all worked out. There are advantages and disadvantages to marrying later, and one of the advantages is hopefully you've learned a few things and you're smarter and you're wiser, actually not smarter but wiser, and probably have better financial stability. Okay, when you're younger and your fuse is longer and a bunch of other stuff. Okay, but also there's a sense of when you get older you want it quieter and cleaner. And that ain't the case with kids, right? And so that was a hard adjustment. And there's not really going to be much time in our life where we have this season, my wife and I together with no kids, empty house, where we have just focused on each other and doing things together, and she could travel with me and whatever, because we still have both of our daughters in our health, and I'm 74. So that's part of the the trade-off, I guess, for it. So I don't recommend waiting. I think it's actually better, especially for raising a family, to get married sooner. And most people do. Waiting to the end of their 40s, that makes everything a lot harder, I think, even though it does have some advantages. Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing that I've learned from you that's been very encouraging also, specifically on this and just what I want to do with my life, which is get into apologetics and potentially get married, which is the whole how the Spirit leads us, and how people misuse that. How it's just kind of just go for it, do what you like. Apologetics is one of the ways I came to faith. Might as well, I'm getting into that. I'm going to get a certificate in apologetics from Biola.
Good.
And then I'm going to go through the STRU. So I'm like, instead of just waiting, just go do it. And then getting married.
Okay, thank you for mentioning that. This is a very important part of my entire approach when I was younger. There was a sense in which whoever was going to get me, so to speak, was going to have to hit a moving target. And because I was single for so long, for some reason, I kept getting asked to speak at singles events. And I would tell the audience, I said, look, I'm like 45 and I'm single. Why do you want to hear from me? Listen to everything I do and then do the opposite, So, but here's what I said. What if you were to find out, God were to tell you that, and this is a stipulation for my little thought experiment here, that you were to know for certain you will never be married. Okay, if you knew that, what would you do with your life? Okay, figure that out. Answer that question. Write it down. What would you do? And then, okay, I said, okay, do it. Do that. Do it right now. And that's kind of like what you described to me. You've got your goals, you've got your ideas, you're going to go for it, and you're open to relationships. You're going to keep your eyes open, whatever. And but you're not going to wait to make your life happen. Although if you, just in the last month, you've listened to a year of my podcasts, it did occur to me that maybe you need to get a life. I don't know.
I know. I listen to them at work. I do carpentry.
So yeah. Well, see,
yeah.
by the way, I was a carpenter, a finished carpenter. Are you a framer or finish?
No, I'm a finished carpenter.
Okay, so we fix all the problems that the framers cause, right? I get it.
Yeah.
So I
guys.
did kitchen cabinets and interiors and stuff like that. So I did that before I got into full-time Christian work. So you're on the same path I was on. Hey,
how about that?
Yeah, so, nothing wrong with that. You're taking care of things. You're trying to be productive for the Lord, even though you're working and taking care of yourself, and you're trying to make a difference for the Lord. You're becoming a student of your craft. You want to do apologetics. You're getting the training, and you're on the right track. So I say, keep going for it, and keep your eyes open. Keep praying. I prayed all the time about that. It just wasn't in God's sovereign purposes for me to get married earlier. So that's just the way it all worked out.
Yep.
All right.
Well, thank you for all the encouragement, Greg.
Yes, you're so welcome, Zach. And I'm not going to take another call. I'm just going to keep talking here after. Amy just said, "Hey, you can't hang up. You got 3 minutes left. You can't take another call."
While I still got you for a quick second, I sent in my STR Outpost application, and Robbie in another episode said that I would get like an automatic email back, but I never got one back.
Well, that's great. Well, we just I think this week just added, or we're in the process of adding 10 more outposts, bringing our number to 130. And we have outposts right now in Canada, England, Australia, Ireland, Zambia, Portugal, and 33 different states. And those facts probably will change with the 10 new ones we're just adding. So I'm glad if you're interested in that. I encourage other people to do that as well. It's kind of the way of building a community of kindred spirits right there in your local church. And we have a website that you can go to. It's I'm looking for it now. STR. No, that's not the right book. No, that's not it. Outposts. Oh, here it is, str.org/outposts. No duh, right? str.org/outposts. So I'm glad you're thinking about that, Zach, and it's going to be another thing that moves you forward, because what I've said here, and I don't know if you've heard me say this in the last year of podcasts that you've listened to while you're doing your carpentry work, that my encouragement is people to be two things, a student of their craft. And if you like apologetics and following your interests is really valid, in my view, that's what I did. I liked apologetics, so I took courses, got a master's degree, blah, blah, blah. Be a student of your craft, okay, and bloom where you're planted. And I think this is a great, the outpost is a great way to do that, to bloom where you're planted. That you have an opportunity right there to encourage other Christians and people of like mind, and there you go. So you're doing great, Zach. I tip my hat to you.
And one last thing is, I'm also taking the last piece of advice, which is just trying to hit the ball and get on base. So if that's just getting a certificate, starting an outpost, I'm just trying to get on base.
There you go. All right, you're doing well. Okay, give me a call in 6 months. Tell me how things are going. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thanks so much, Zach. All the best to you. Well, that's about it for us, friends. That's great to hear a call like that. Strategic partner, rocking and rolling, doing his thing. That's great. All right, Greg Koukl here for Stand to Reason. Thanks for spending this time with us. Give them heaven, friends. Bye-bye now.